London had always been on Daniel's travel list. He had seen pictures of Buckingham Palace, read about the royal guards, and watched countless videos of tourists trying to make them laugh. To him, it all seemed like a fun challenge. He had heard stories of how the guards never reacted, no matter what people did to distract them. Some tourists danced, made funny faces, or even told jokes, but the soldiers remained completely serious. Daniel found it fascinating and decided he would test them himself. As he stepped out of his hotel on a bright morning, he felt a rush of excitement. The cool London air brushed against his face, and the streets were buzzing with life. He had one goal for the day: to visit Buckingham Palace and see the royal guards in person. His camera was fully charged, and he was ready to capture every moment of his adventure. When he finally arrived at the palace gates, he was amazed. The grand structure stood tall, its golden details shining under the sunlight. A crowd had gathered near the entrance, all waiting to see the famous changing of the guard ceremony. But Daniel wasn't just there to watch. He wanted to take things a step further. As he walked closer, he spotted the soldiers standing perfectly still. Their red uniforms and tall black hats made them look like statues. They held their rifles firmly, their eyes staring straight ahead. Their discipline was impressive, but Daniel couldn't resist the urge to test them. He joined a group of tourists who were taking pictures, but his mind was already planning something bigger. They say these guards don't react to anything, he thought. Let's see if that's really true. At first, he tried the usual tricks. He stood next to one of the guards and made silly faces, hoping for a smile. Nothing. The soldier didn't even blink. Daniel then pretended to trip right in front of him, making an exaggerated fall. A few people in the crowd chuckled, but the guard didn't move an inch. This only made Daniel more determined. Feeling playful, he took out his phone and started recording. "All right, guys," he said, speaking to his online followers. "I'm about to do something no one has ever done before. I'm going to challenge the royal guard to a duel." The crowd around him turned their heads, some curious, others amused. A few tourists whispered to each other, wondering if this man was serious. Daniel, however, was too caught up in the moment to notice. He grabbed his umbrella and held it like a sword, pointing it toward the guard in a dramatic stance. "I, Sir Daniel of the United States, challenge you to a duel," he announced, his voice filled with mock seriousness. The crowd laughed, expecting this to be another harmless joke. But something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would turn this lighthearted moment into an unforgettable experience. Daniel stood confidently in front of the royal guard, his umbrella held like a sword. The crowd around him chuckled, expecting this to be just another silly tourist prank. People pulled out their phones, eager to record the moment. Some whispered to each other, amused by his boldness. Daniel felt even more encouraged by their reaction. He took a step closer, waving his umbrella playfully. "Come on, Sir Guard," he said with a grin. A true knight never ignores a challenge. His voice carried excitement, but deep down, he still expected no response. After all, these guards were famous for never reacting. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The soldier stood still, his face as serious as ever. His uniform was spotless, his polished boots firmly planted on the ground. His hands gripped the rifle across his chest, his expression as unreadable as a statue. The silence around him only made Daniel more eager to push the joke further. The tourists turned to the audience with a laugh. "See, he won't move. I could do this all day." He took a few more playful jabs in the air with his umbrella, pretending to fence against an invisible opponent. More people laughed, and some clapped, enjoying the unexpected performance. Then something changed. With a sudden, sharp movement, the guard stomped his foot forward, his polished boots striking the pavement with a loud thud. The sound echoed through the air, breaking the lighthearted mood. The laughter from the crowd quickly faded. Daniel froze, his grip tightening on the umbrella. He hadn't expected this. The guard, without breaking his disciplined posture, spoke in a firm, commanding voice. "Step back immediately." The words were short but powerful. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. The tone wasn't playful, nor was it friendly. It was a warning. The kind of warning that demanded to be taken seriously. A few people in the crowd gasped. Others whispered in hushed tones, unsure of what would happen next. Some quickly lowered their phones, realizing that this was no longer a joke. Daniel, still caught off guard, forced a nervous chuckle. "Oh wow, you actually spoke," he said, trying to lighten the mood. "I thought you guys weren't allowed to talk." The guard didn't respond. His eyes remained locked forward, but his stance had changed. He was no longer just standing still. He was ready. The air around him felt different, heavier. Daniel could sense that he had crossed a line. A second guard, standing a few feet away, shifted slightly, also taking a firmer stance. Nearby, a couple of security personnel took notice of the situation, their eyes now watching Daniel closely. The once playful atmosphere had turned serious. The weight of his actions finally started to sink in. Daniel wasn't just messing with a regular street performer. He was challenging a highly trained soldier, someone whose duty was to protect one of the most important places in the country. For the first time since arriving at the palace, Daniel wasn't sure if he wanted to continue. His joke had gone further than he had planned, and now he had to decide his next move. Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. The laughter and excitement from moments ago had completely disappeared. The crowd that had once cheered him on was now silent, their faces filled with curiosity and tension. He could feel all eyes on him, waiting to see what would happen next. The royal guard, still standing firm, had not moved again, but his voice echoed in Daniel's mind. "Step back immediately." It was not a request, it was an order, and Daniel knew that ignoring it could lead to real trouble. Still gripping his umbrella, he hesitated. Should he step back and end the joke, or should he continue, just to prove that he wasn't scared? He had seen so many videos online of people trying to get a reaction out of the guards, but he had never seen anything like this. Most of the time, the soldiers remained still, completely unfazed. But this time, things were different. This time, the guard had spoken, and his voice carried weight. Daniel cleared his throat and took a tiny step back, just enough to show that he wasn't trying to push the joke further. All right, he said, forcing a nervous smile. "Didn't mean to upset anyone. Just having a little fun." The guard did not respond. He didn't nod, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge Daniel's words in any way. He simply resumed his original stance, his hands gripping his rifle firmly, his gaze fixed straight ahead. It was as if nothing had happened at all. For a brief moment, Daniel felt relieved. Maybe that was it. Maybe the situation had passed. But then, a voice from the crowd broke the silence. "Dude, you almost got yourself in trouble," someone muttered. Another person, an older man with a thick British accent, shook his head. "You don't mess with the royal guards, mate. They're not just for show." Daniel glanced around, suddenly realizing how foolish he must have looked. What had seemed like harmless fun just moments ago now felt embarrassing. The crowd was no longer laughing with him. They were watching him closely, almost as if they were waiting for him to make another mistake. To make things worse, 2 security officers had moved closer to the scene. They weren't rushing toward him or yelling, but their presence alone was enough to make Daniel's stomach tighten. He knew they had been watching the whole time, and if he pushed his luck any further, they wouldn't hesitate to step in. He swallowed hard, then slowly lowered his umbrella. "All right, folks," he said, trying to make light of the situation. "Guess I'll leave the dueling to the professionals." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, but the mood was no longer playful. People were still watching, still waiting to see if the guards or security would take further action. Daniel took a deep breath and took a full step back this time. The tension in the air seemed to ease just a little. He wasn't about to take any more chances. He had come for a fun experience, not for trouble. And it was clear now, this wasn't a game. As he turned to walk away, He could still feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. He had learned something today, something important, but he didn't realize just how unforgettable this moment would become. Not yet. Daniel took a deep breath as he walked away from the royal guard, his steps slower than usual. His heart was still beating fast, and he could feel the tension lingering in the air. The crowd had started to shift their attention elsewhere, but a few people still glanced at him, whispering among themselves. He could tell that some were amused, while others clearly thought he had made a mistake. As he moved further from the guard, he noticed two security officers standing a short distance away. They weren't chasing him or calling him back, but their eyes were fixed on him, watching his every move. Daniel suddenly felt the full weight of what had just happened. This wasn't a joke to them. He had unknowingly stepped too close to a line he shouldn't have crossed. Trying to shake off the uneasy feeling, he made his way toward a nearby bench and sat down. He pulled out his phone, checking the video he had recorded earlier. The first part was funny, his exaggerated challenge, the laughter from the crowd. But as he watched further, his own face changed. He could see the exact moment when the mood shifted, when the guard had stomped his foot and issued the warning. Even on video, the moment felt intense. He turned off his phone screen and sighed. "Well, that didn't go how I planned," he muttered to himself. Just then, an older man wearing a cap and holding a tourist guidebook walked over and sat on the same bench. He had been in the crowd earlier, watching everything unfold. "Son," the man said with a slight chuckle, "you gave us all a bit of a show back there." Daniel let out a small laugh. "Yeah, didn't expect it to turn so serious, though." The man nodded. "Most people don't. But these guards aren't like the actors you see in old castles pretending to be knights. They're real soldiers, highly trained, and they take their job very seriously." Daniel frowned. "I knew they were serious, but I thought they weren't allowed to react." The older man leaned back. "That's what a lot of tourists think. But their main duty is to protect the palace and the royal family. If they feel someone is interfering too much, they have the right to issue a warning. And if that doesn't work—" He paused for a moment. "Let's just say you wouldn't want to find out what happens next." Daniel's stomach tightened at the thought. He had only been joking, but now he realized that things could have gone very differently if he had pushed any further. The man smiled. "You learned your lesson without getting into trouble. That's a win." Daniel nodded, finally allowing himself to relax a little. He had come to Buckingham Palace expecting to get a funny video, maybe even a viral moment. Instead, he had walked away with something far more valuable, a new respect for the discipline and duty of the royal guards. As he sat there, watching more tourists approach the palace gates, he wondered how many of them thought the same thing he had when he arrived. How many of them believed it was all just for fun. He certainly wouldn't make that mistake again. Daniel remained seated on the bench, watching the steady stream of tourists approach the palace gates. Some took pictures, others recorded videos, and a few tried to joke around with the guards, just like he had done earlier. Now, seeing it from a different perspective, he realized how unaware most people were about the seriousness of the royal guard's duties. A few feet away, a young boy, probably around 10 years old, stood beside his father, pointing excitedly at one of the guards. "Dad, look, he's not moving at all," the boy exclaimed. His father chuckled. "That's their job, son. They're trained to stand completely still." The boy grinned mischievously. "Can I try to make him laugh?" Daniel leaned forward slightly, curious to see what the father would say. The man shook his head. "No, we have to respect them. They're not just there for fun. They're real soldiers." Daniel smiled to himself. He wished someone had told him that earlier. It might have saved him from the awkward situation he had put himself in. Just then, he heard a soft click and looked over to see a notification pop up on his phone. It was a message from one of his friends back home. "Hey man, saw your video on a travel page. That was crazy." Daniel's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" He quickly opened the video sharing app and, to his surprise, found that his clip had already started gaining attention. Someone from the crowd must have uploaded it before he even had a chance to post it himself. There were already hundreds of comments, and the number of views was climbing fast. Curious, he scrolled through some of the reactions. This guy really thought he could challenge a royal guard. Lol. The way the guard stomped his foot. Chills. I wouldn't mess with them. Lucky he stopped when he did. Those guards don't play around. Tourists need to learn some respect. Daniel sighed as he read through the mixed reactions. Some people found the situation funny, while others criticized him for not taking the guard seriously. He didn't blame them. Now that he had time to reflect, he agreed. He had been careless. A new comment popped up. Did you get in trouble after this? Daniel thought for a moment before replying. No, but I learned my lesson. Those guards are the real deal. Wouldn't recommend messing with them. As soon as he sent the message, another idea crossed his mind. Maybe he could turn this situation into something positive. Instead of just letting the video spread as another tourist fails moment, he could use it to share what he had learned. He started typing a new post. Hey everyone. So, I was that guy in the video. At first, I thought challenging a royal guard would be funny, but I quickly realized they take their job very seriously. I just want to remind other tourists. These guards aren't there for entertainment. They're real soldiers, protecting an important place. I was lucky to just get a warning. If you visit Buckingham Palace, respect their space. Trust me, it's not worth the risk. He hit send and leaned back against the bench, feeling a strange mix of embarrassment and relief. His mistake had already spread online, but at least now, he could use it to help others avoid making the same one. Daniel put his phone down and took a deep breath. He had never expected his silly challenge to turn into something so serious. What started as a harmless joke had now become a lesson, not just for him, but for many people watching his video online. As he sat on the bench, he noticed a few more notifications popping up. His post was getting attention. Some people appreciated his honesty, while others still laughed at the situation. Respect to you for admitting your mistake. Glad you didn't get into real trouble. Those guards mean business. This was actually interesting to learn. I always thought they were just there for show. Daniel felt a little better knowing that his experience was teaching others something useful. But he also knew that not everyone would see it that way. Some would only remember him as the guy who tried to duel a royal guard. He sighed and shook his head, realizing that this would probably follow him for a while. Deciding to clear his mind, he stood up and started walking around the area. The beauty of Buckingham Palace was still something to admire, even after what had happened. The grand gates, the towering statues, and the golden details on the palace itself looked even more impressive now that he had a better understanding of what they represented. He wandered over to a quieter section of the palace grounds, where fewer tourists were gathered. As he stood there, looking at the grand structure, he heard a voice behind him. "Excuse me, sir." Daniel turned around quickly. His heart skipped a beat when he saw one of the security officers who had been watching him earlier. The officer was tall, dressed in a dark uniform, and had a serious expression on his face. For a moment, Daniel felt nervous. Was he about to get in trouble after all? The officer studied him for a second before speaking again. "I saw your post online," he said. "I appreciate you taking responsibility for your actions." Daniel let out a small breath of relief. "Yeah, I didn't mean any harm. I just didn't realize how serious the guard's job really is." The officer nodded. "Most people don't. That's why we have to be strict. The royal guards are not just standing there for decoration. They are trained soldiers, and their duty is to protect this place. If anyone crosses the line, they have to act immediately." Daniel nodded. "I get that now. I was lucky that I only got a warning." The officer gave him a firm look. "You were. But understand this, if you had taken one step further, the guard would have had to respond differently. And that's something no tourist wants to experience." Daniel swallowed hard. He could tell the officer wasn't trying to scare him, but the message was clear. He had been closer to real trouble than he had realized. The officer then gave him a small nod. "Enjoy the rest of your visit. And next time, just take pictures like everyone else." Daniel chuckled nervously. "Will do." As the officer walked away, Daniel stood there for a moment, letting everything sink in. This trip to Buckingham Palace had turned out to be far more memorable than he had planned. Daniel watched as the security officer walked away, his words still echoing in his mind. If you had taken one step further, the guard would have had to respond differently. That thought sent a shiver down his spine. He had come so close to making a terrible mistake without even realizing it. Looking around, he noticed that the crowd near the royal guards had changed. New tourists had arrived, eager to take photos and record videos. Some were just admiring the scene, while others were trying to make the guards react. A group of young men stood near the fence, whispering and laughing. One of them, holding a camera, nudged his friend forward. "Go on," the guy with the camera said, grinning. "Make him move." Daniel sighed. It was like watching a replay of his own mistake. The tourist in front took a few steps toward the guard, waving his hands dramatically, pretending to challenge him like a knight in a medieval battle. The guard remained still, just as Daniel had expected. For a moment, Daniel considered walking away. It wasn't his problem. He had learned his lesson. Why should he care what others did? But then, something made him stop. He knew exactly how this would go. First, the jokes. Then, the teasing. And if the tourist got too close or crossed the line, the guard would have to react. The crowd would gasp, and the tourist would either laugh it off, or, like Daniel, suddenly realize he had made a mistake. Before he could overthink it, Daniel took a step forward. "Hey man," he said, addressing the tourist before he could push his joke any further. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The young man turned to him, confused. "Why not?" "It's just for fun." Daniel shook his head. "That's what I thought too. But trust me, these guys don't mess around. I tried something similar just a little while ago, and the guard actually responded. It got serious real fast." The guy raised an eyebrow. "Wait, was that you in that viral video?" Daniel let out a small chuckle. "Yeah, unfortunately." A few of the guy's friends turned to look at him, now more curious than before. "Dude, you almost got in trouble," one of them asked. Daniel nodded. "Yep, and I got lucky. The guard gave me a warning, but if I had taken one step further, it could have been worse." He glanced toward the security officers, who were still keeping an eye on the crowd. "They're watching everything. If you try too hard to mess with the guards, they won't let it slide." The guy hesitated for a moment, looking at his friends. Then, finally, he sighed and stepped back. "All right, I get it. I don't want to end up in one of those videos where someone gets thrown out of the place." Daniel smiled. "Good call." As the group moved on, Daniel felt a sense of relief. Maybe he couldn't stop every tourist from making the same mistake, but at least he had helped one. And that was enough for now. Daniel took a deep breath and looked around Buckingham Palace one last time. The golden gates, the massive stone walls, and the royal guard standing tall. It all looked different to him now. Just a few hours ago, he had seen this place as another tourist attraction, a spot to capture a funny moment. But now, he understood it was much more than that. As he walked toward the exit, he couldn't help but check his phone again. His post had gained even more attention. More comments had flooded in, and his message about respecting the royal guards was being shared by people he didn't even know. Some thanked him for explaining what happened, while others admitted they had also thought the guards were just for show. One comment caught his eye. "I was planning to do something similar when I visit next month, but now I won't. Thanks for the heads up." Daniel smiled. Knowing that his experience could help others avoid making the same mistake made him feel better about the whole situation. Just then, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw the older man who had sat next to him on the bench earlier. The man gave him a knowing smile. "Looks like you had quite the day, son." Daniel chuckled. "Yeah, not exactly how I thought it would go." The man nodded. "But you learned something important. And more than that, you passed the lesson on to others." "That's a rare thing." Daniel shrugged. "I guess so. I just didn't want anyone else to get in trouble." The man patted him on the shoulder. "That's the right attitude. This place holds a lot of history, and the guards are part of it. They don't stand there for fun. They have a job to do. You understood that today. And trust me, that's worth more than any funny video." Daniel thought about those words as he made his way through the streets of London. His friends had been waiting for updates on his trip, expecting crazy stories and fun moments. He had something to tell them, all right, but it wasn't the kind of story they were expecting. When he got back to his hotel, he sat down with his laptop and started typing. He decided to turn his experience into a blog post, something that could reach even more people. He titled it, "What I Learned from Challenging a Royal Guard," and started writing about everything that had happened. From the excitement, to the warning, to the lesson he had learned. By the time he finished, he felt a sense of satisfaction. His trip to Buckingham Palace had turned into something more meaningful than he ever expected. He had made a mistake, but instead of letting it define him, he had used it as an opportunity to grow and to help others understand the importance of respect. As he closed his laptop and looked out the window at the city lights, he smiled to himself. This was a trip he would never forget, and for once, he didn't need a viral video to prove it.